first in those early days, I was so desperate, like whether it was pride or insecurity or just I don't know, a million reasons, but like like anyone that was even remotely interested, like I wanted them to come and be a part of it, and I was so desperate for people, and because I wanted to get established and I wanted to be able to have a picture taken of what we were doing and have it look like people were actually there, and just God just beat that out of me over the course of probably too long. But what ended up happening is because I was just desperate for anyone and everyone, if someone said they were a Christian, I would bring them in to be a part of it. And remember, you can speak to this in a little bit, but they had no concept of the vision we were trying to do. They had just, and it would just, it was actually hurting what we were trying to do ultimately, rather than helping, because they weren't down for the cause. They weren't really in there to be a plant. They were just wanted it to be what they wanted it to be. And I was sacrificing what God had called me to just so I could feel like it was real. And so that was just a lesson that had to be learned in those early days. And I'm thankful. I think actually, and this maybe even goes to the advice bit, but I think a lot of church plants struggle and die in that space. And I think, if just being very honest, I think we would have died in those first 6 to 9 months, year, if it had just not been for God's grace, His providence. Sometimes I say, I think God wants this church planted more than I do. So, and then also on a personal level, my family. I have a wife of 10 years now and 3 babies. When we planted, I had my daughter, and then my son was born 2 weeks before we launched, and then we got pregnant again like 3 months in, and it was just like, what? And so we have 3 kids under 3, and I guess my daughter just turned 4, so that's not true anymore. But it's just a chaotic household, and so having to find ways to not let my family suffer. So Fridays for my family is just like locked, like untouchable. I don't do any like work on that day. It's just I'm home with my family, having fun, enjoying them.
So for me, as I was presented with the idea of church plant, in the very beginning, when we sent out DJ and his wife out from Southland, it seemed like a very foreign concept of church planting. In fact, I even thought, like, why? That we already have a church here. Why would we want to plant another church? But as that idea began to sink into my heart and understood what the biblical concept of like church planting and you looked at it in the book of Acts, God allowed persecution to happen and send out the Christians from Jerusalem, spread them out throughout all the parts of the world. Then you see that church planting was happening then. It was kind of the similar thing for me. It's like we need to be in Downey. We need to establish a church that is going to have, from the very beginning, the DNA of the church is to church plant other churches. And so this vision needs to be cast out often, and people need to like really understand it, that we're a church that's going to plant other churches. And so that particular idea, for a lot of the people that either come from a church background or non-church background, is very difficult because they already have this already made up concept of what church should look like. And so they come in and they expect these things. And so when the vision collides with their thinking or their theologies, it's, it's conflicting. So they begin to ask questions. And why do we do this? And again, we welcome these questions. We're open to this. But the vision is not our vision. It's God's vision. Is that we present to them and say, hey, we always keep everyone with an open hand. Knowing that God is going to prepare us to send out another team to plant another church in a very, very short time. And that's really the heart of our mission here, as equipping, discipling, building the people of God to know that they're going to be here for some time and be sent out.
Yeah, so I had a guy, a mentor of mine, he is a church planting coach, and he told me, he said, hey, he wasn't saying this to discourage me necessarily, but he was trying to help us count the cost. He said, Downey is where church plants go to die. And by Downey, he meant kind of like southeast LA. And he said, because here's what happens is you have, it's already built out, right? So finding places to meet is gonna be really tough. There's a lot of kids. And so if you're gonna do any sort of real effective ministry, you need to care for kids. And that kind of goes with the first one. You need space, and then kids, you need lots of space sometimes, and so that makes that difficult. And then third, he says it's not the richest part of LA, and yet it's still LA. So you have LA prices, but not necessarily LA income.
Mm-hmm.
And so the gap there makes number one and number two, just the kind of all three of those things together make it really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've definitely experienced that. Finding a place has been incredibly tough. We met in elementary school, way too expensive. Wasn't working out. We met in my home, which was great for a season, but we grew out of that, and caring for kids there was tough. And the guy just blessed us with this Korean church building.
Mm-hmm.
But I literally found this place. I was walking and praying. It's in the middle of a neighborhood, and I walked down the street, and I thought, what is this place? And I walked on and met the Korean pastor here, and we formed a relationship. It was literally God's providence of just, here you go. And they've been super gracious to us,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that we're reaching the community and giving us a sweet deal. And that's the kingdom partnerships of people caring about the gospel and helping that has been really beautiful.